Emily was a little 7-year-old girl who had lived most of her short life surrounded by the quiet sound of hospital machines, soft whispers of doctors, and the comforting voices of her parents Michael and Laura who never left her side, and the people of Springfield, a small American town where everyone knew everyone, had grown familiar with her struggle, and while other children spent their days running in the park, playing ball, or chasing butterflies under the warm summer sun, Emily's world was made of white hospital walls, gentle nurses, and the strong but tired hands of her mother holding hers every night, and for years she fought bravely against an illness that no one in the town could pronounce properly, and though doctors from Boston, New York, and even Washington tried their best, bringing new treatments, new medicines, and endless tests, the sickness inside her body refused to go away, and as the seasons changed outside her window, she watched life pass by like a painting she could never step into, and the town prayed for her, sometimes gathering at the little church on the hill, sometimes lighting candles at night, hoping for a miracle, but the miracle never came, until the day a doctor with sad eyes told Michael and Laura the words no parent should ever hear, that their daughter had only a few days left, and with heavy hearts and trembling hands they decided to bring her home, to let her spend whatever time remained in the little house with blue curtains where she had been born, and in those days the house was filled with both sorrow and love, for Laura tried to smile through her tears as she read stories to Emily, stories about princesses, stars, and places far away, while Michael carried her gently to the porch so she could feel the fresh air on her face, and even though she was weak, her eyes still shone with something that neither illness nor fear could steal, a soft spark of wonder that refused to be broken, and every evening she would sit near the window, her small face pressed to the glass, watching the street outside as if expecting someone, though no one ever came, until one golden evening when the sun was sinking low and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, a figure appeared at the edge of the yard, not a person but a dog, large with golden fur that seemed to catch the last light of the sun, and he stood still at the gate, his dark eyes locked on the little girl inside the window, and for a moment time itself seemed to stop, because the dog did not bark, did not move, only watched her with a gaze both gentle and strong, and Emily raised her thin hand, pointing with trembling fingers, whispering softly, "Mom, he came for me," and Laura, startled, hurried to the window, expecting perhaps a stray from the neighborhood, but when she asked the neighbors later, none of them had ever seen this dog before, and what was stranger was that he refused to leave, standing guard at the gate as if he knew the little girl inside needed him, and though Michael tried clapping his hands, even setting out food to lure him away, the dog remained, calm and unmoving, and that night while the stars filled the sky, Emily could not sleep, her thoughts always drifting to the dog outside, and when morning came he was still there, waiting, as though he had been placed in her world by something greater than chance, and finally, unable to ignore his persistence, Laura opened the door and let him in, and to everyone's surprise the dog did not run wildly into the house, did not sniff or explore, but walked slowly, steadily, straight to the room where Emily lay, and there he lowered his head beside her bed, resting it gently without a sound, his warm breath brushing against her tiny hand, and something incredible happened in that moment, because Emily smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in weeks, her eyes lighting up with joy, and she whispered the name that came to her heart, "Buddy," she said. And the name seemed to fit perfectly, and from that day on Buddy became more than just a visitor, he became her companion, her silent protector, her light in the shadow of illness, and with him by her side something in Emily began to change, for she asked to sit outside in her wheelchair so that Buddy could sit beside her, she asked for food when before she had none, and she laughed, soft but clear, as Buddy wagged his tail or nudged her hand with his nose, and the neighbors who passed by were astonished, for they had watched her fade for so long, yet now she seemed to glow with a strength no one could explain, and when doctors visited the house expecting the worst, they were shocked to see a little girl with brighter cheeks and clearer eyes, and though they checked her carefully, puzzled by the change, they had no explanation. But Michael and Laura did not need one, for they saw with their own eyes that Buddy was giving their daughter something medicine could not, a reason to hope, a reason to fight. And at night when Emily closed her eyes, Buddy lay at her door, watching silently as though guarding her dreams, and in those quiet hours Michael turned to Laura and whispered, "I don't know what he is or where he came from, but he's giving her something we couldn't," and Laura, with tears in her eyes, only nodded, holding his hand tightly, because in her heart she knew too, that the dog was not ordinary, that his arrival was no accident, that perhaps he had been sent for Emily, and though no one in Springfield could explain it, they all felt the same when they saw him walking proudly beside the little girl, as if the universe had finally answered their prayers in the form of a golden dog who came out of nowhere and gave hope where there had been none. And so the story of Emily and Buddy began, a story that would soon touch not just her family, not just her town, but the hearts of many who would one day hear of the little girl who had only days to live until a mysterious dog appeared and changed everything. From the moment Buddy entered Emily's life, something inside her began to awaken, and though doctors had given her only a few days, each sunrise seemed to bring her a little more strength, and her parents, Michael and Laura, watched with amazement as their daughter who had once lain weak and silent now smiled with soft laughter whenever the golden dog nudged her arm or wagged his tail in playful circles, and while Michael had once doubted the strange arrival of this mysterious animal, thinking he might be nothing more than a stray passing through town, his doubts slowly melted each time he saw Emily's tired eyes light up at the sight of Buddy's gentle presence, for it was not only comfort that the dog brought, but something stronger, something that seemed to reach into Emily's fragile spirit and lift it higher than any medicine ever had, and soon the little girl asked to go outside every morning, bundled in her blanket on the old wooden chair by the porch, where Buddy would sit close to her feet, always calm, always alert, watching the world as if he had been waiting for this purpose all his life. And neighbors began to stop by, curious about the change they saw, whispering among themselves that the little girl who had been fading was now holding on, and though they could not explain it, they could see it with their own eyes, and some even brought small gifts, flowers, or cards, just to show their support. But Emily's happiest moments were not with gifts or visitors, they were with Buddy, who followed her everywhere, from her room to the garden, from the porch to the little corner of the yard where wild daisies grew, and when she was too tired to walk, Buddy would rest quietly beside her, his steady breathing like a song that calmed her, and in those hours Laura would often sit by the window, tears slipping down her cheeks, for she knew something extraordinary was happening, something beyond human understanding, and she prayed silently, thanking God for whatever force had brought this golden dog into their lives. And Michael too, though a practical man who trusted science and doctors, could not deny the miracle before his eyes, and one night as he tucked Emily in, he whispered to Laura that maybe miracles did not always arrive in bright lights or grand gestures, sometimes they came quietly, on four paws, with kind eyes and a heart that understood more than words ever could. And as days passed into weeks, Buddy's bond with Emily deepened, for he seemed to know her moods, her pain, and her joy, without a single word spoken, and when she struggled to sit up, he would nudge her gently, steadying her, and when she was too weak to smile, he would lay his head on her lap until her hand reached out to touch him, and then she would smile again. And in the evenings, when the house grew quiet and shadows stretched long, Buddy would curl up at the doorway of Emily's room, guarding her as though the very air around her was his responsibility. And Michael Waking in the middle of the night, often found comfort in that sight, the golden figure keeping watch, never wavering, never sleeping too deeply, always ready for her, and it was not long before word of Emily and Buddy spread across the town, for Springfield was a place where news traveled fast, and soon families who had never visited before came by just to see them, to catch a glimpse of the little girl whose laughter had returned, and the dog who had brought it back, and though Michael tried to keep the house quiet for Emily's sake, he understood why people came, for there was something in the story that touched every heart, a reminder that hope could appear even in the darkest hours, and the local newspaper even wrote about it, calling Buddy a guardian angel in disguise, and when Emily saw her picture in the paper, she giggled, holding it close, saying softly, "Buddy is famous now," and Buddy, as if he understood, wagged his tail and leaned against her chair, his eyes never leaving hers, and with each passing day Emily's body showed small signs of healing that baffled the doctors, for though they continued to check her and expected the illness to progress, instead they found stability, even slight improvements, and they admitted quietly to Michael and Laura that they could not explain it, and some shook their heads in disbelief while others whispered that perhaps faith had done what medicine could not, and yet through all of this, Emily never asked why or how. She simply accepted Buddy as the friend she had always needed, and she often told her mother in her soft voice, "Mom, Buddy talks to me without words, he tells me I am not alone," and Laura, hearing those words, felt her heart swell with both gratitude and wonder, because she too could see the truth in her daughter's eyes, that this was more than just a dog, this was a bond that had been written in a language deeper than any spoken, a bond of love, trust, and healing, and as autumn leaves began to fall in Springfield, turning the town golden and red, Emily and Buddy were often seen together walking slowly along the garden path, her hand resting lightly on his back, her steps shaky but growing stronger, and neighbors waved, smiling through their tears at the sight, for they knew they were witnessing something rare, something unforgettable, and even though the doctors still warned that the battle was not over, Emily's family now carried a light of hope in their hearts, a hope that had been given back to them by a mysterious golden dog who had appeared at their gate one evening and refused to leave, and so part two of their journey became not about fear of the days slipping away, but about cherishing every sunrise, every laugh, every step Emily took with Buddy by her side, as if the world itself had paused to let this miracle unfold one moment at a time. As the days turned into weeks, what had begun as a quiet whisper of hope in Michael and Laura's hearts grew into something stronger, for Emily was not only smiling more but also regaining a strength that no one had expected, and though she was still frail, her small hands no longer trembled as much when she reached out to touch Buddy's soft golden fur, and her voice, once weak and barely heard, carried a little more energy each time she called his name, and the most astonishing change came the morning she asked her father if she could try to walk again, words Michael had not heard in so long that for a moment he thought he had misheard, but when he looked at her determined eyes, he understood that she truly meant it, and though his heart was cautious, he could not deny her, so he carefully helped her to her feet, and Buddy stood close by, steady as a rock, letting Emily hold onto his back, and step by step she moved across the room, each footfall slow but filled with determination, until she reached the window where she had once only sat and dreamed of the outside world, and when she turned with a smile brighter than the morning sun, Michael and Laura both wept with joy, for it was a sight they never thought they would see again, and from that day forward Emily began practicing with Buddy every morning, walking a little farther, breathing a little easier, laughing a little louder, and soon the neighbors who passed by the yard would stop to watch, clapping softly and cheering her on as she took her shaky but proud steps across the grass, always with Buddy at her side, and the story of her progress began to spread beyond Springfield, first carried by word of mouth, then by a local reporter who had written a short piece about the Springfield miracle that was published in the town paper, and before long larger newspapers picked up the story, printing pictures of a golden dog guiding a frail but smiling child, and readers across the state were touched by the tale of hope, and television crews soon arrived, setting up cameras outside the little blue-curtained house, asking questions and filming Emily as she laughed with Buddy in the yard, and though Michael worried about the attention overwhelming his daughter, he could not stop the wave of kindness that came from all corners of the country. Letters arrived by the hundreds, some with drawings from children who said they believed in miracles now, others from parents who had sick children of their own and said Emily's story gave them strength, and still others from strangers who simply wanted to say they were praying for her, and each night Laura would sit by Emily's bed, reading her the letters, and Emily would giggle at the funny drawings and smile shyly when hearing how many people were cheering for her, and through it all Buddy remained unchanged, calm and faithful, never distracted by the cameras or the visitors, never interested in the fame that grew around him, for his eyes stayed fixed only on Emily, as if his entire world existed in her laughter and her touch, and those who came to see them often left in tears, saying they felt something when they looked at Buddy, something they could not explain, as if he carried a presence beyond what an ordinary animal could hold, and even the doctors who returned to check on Emily were astonished, for instead of the steady decline they had predicted, her body now showed signs of strength and healing, and though they searched for answers in charts and tests, none of the results could explain why her condition was reversing, and one doctor, shaking his head with a smile, finally admitted to Michael that sometimes science could not measure the power of love and hope, and perhaps that was what Buddy had brought into Emily's fragile life, and while experts debated and newspapers wrote headlines, Emily herself thought little of the mystery, for in her world Buddy was simply her friend, the one who listened without words, the one who never left her side, the one who made her believe that tomorrow was worth waiting for, and one evening as she sat on the porch, the autumn air cool and crisp around them, she leaned against Buddy and whispered softly, "You saved me," and though no sound came from him, the way he pressed his head gently against her shoulder was answer enough, and in that moment Laura, standing in the doorway, felt as if she was witnessing something sacred, something that no camera could capture, and as the weeks rolled on Emily grew stronger still, soon running small steps across the yard while Buddy chased beside her, and neighbors clapped louder, some even calling it a miracle out loud, and soon visitors from other towns began arriving just to catch a glimpse of the golden dog and the little girl he had brought back to life, and though Michael tried to shield his daughter from too much attention, he also saw how happy it made her to know she was giving hope to others, and so he let her enjoy it, for the sound of her laughter was worth more than all the peace and quiet in the world, and yet even as joy filled the air, there remained a sense of mystery, for no one knew where Buddy had come from, no one claimed him, and no one could explain why he had chosen Emily's house, but to those who watched closely it seemed as if he carried a mission, as if he had been sent with purpose, for his devotion was too deep to be chance, and every night as he lay at the doorway of Emily's room, guarding her sleep, Michael would look at him and whisper, "Thank you," and though Buddy never responded with words, Michael believed he understood, and so life in Springfield changed, touched by a story that seemed to belong not just to one family but to everyone who believed in the power of hope, and the little girl who once had only days to live now had weeks, and the weeks were turning into months, and the people who had once lit candles of sorrow now lit candles of joy, and all of it because of a mysterious golden dog who had appeared one evening and done what no one else could believe. As autumn deepened in Springfield and the leaves painted the town in bright reds and golden yellows, Emily's laughter filled the air in ways her parents never thought they would hear again, for she now ran small steps across the yard, her cheeks glowing with life, while Buddy stayed at her side like a shadow made of love, and though neighbors celebrated her recovery and newspapers called it a miracle, Michael and Laura still carried quiet fear in their hearts, for they knew how quickly illness could return, and they prayed each night that the strength given to Emily would remain. Yet life has a way of testing even the brightest moments, and one stormy night the test came, when heavy clouds rolled across the sky and rain poured down in sheets, and as thunder cracked, Emily suddenly felt weak again, her breath shallow and her face pale, and Laura rushed to her side, her voice trembling as she called for Michael, who hurried from the kitchen, and in those moments panic filled the small blue-curtained house, for it felt like the shadows of the past had returned to steal the light away, and Buddy, sensing the danger, howled with a sound that echoed through the storm, a sound that carried both sorrow and determination, and then without hesitation he pushed his way into Emily's room, climbing gently onto the bed and pressing his head against her chest, his body curved protectively around hers, and though Michael thought at first to move him, something in Laura's tearful eyes stopped him, for she too could feel that Buddy was doing something no one else could, and as the storm raged outside, Emily's breathing began to steady, her small hands resting softly in Buddy's fur, and soon she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, leaving her parents in awe and gratitude, whispering through their tears that once again the dog had saved her, and the next morning Emily woke stronger, her color returning, her smile faint but steady, and she told her mother in a quiet voice that Buddy had kept her safe through the night, that he had told her in the silence of dreams that she was not to be afraid, and though Laura did not fully understand, she believed every word, for she too had seen with her own eyes the miracle of the night before, and when the doctors visited later, checking Emily carefully, they admitted with puzzled faces that her recovery was holding steady despite the brief setback, and while they offered no explanation, Michael and Laura needed none, for their faith in Buddy had only deepened, and they began to see him not just as a companion but as something greater, a messenger, a guardian, perhaps even an answer to every prayer they had whispered in the darkest hours, and as winter began to creep closer with its cold winds, the story of Emily and Buddy spread even further, reaching beyond the state to national news channels, with people calling in to share how touched they were, and letters and gifts arriving daily, but no matter how much attention came, Buddy remained the same, quiet and steady, uninterested in fame, his devotion fixed only on the little girl he had chosen, and in the evenings when the fire crackled in the living room, Emily would rest with Buddy at her feet, telling her parents softly that she was not afraid anymore, that even if sickness tried to return, she knew she was not alone, and Michael, who once doubted miracles, felt his heart soften each time he heard those words, realizing that faith was not always built on things that could be explained, and one Sunday, the family decided to take Emily to the small church on the hill for the first time in months, and as they entered, the congregation turned, many with tears in their eyes, for they had prayed for this child for so long, and now they saw her walking slowly down the aisle with Buddy by her side, and the pastor, his voice breaking with emotion, called it a blessing, saying that sometimes angels come to us in ways we do not expect, and perhaps this golden dog was one such angel, and though Michael and Laura did not speak, they both knew deep in their hearts that those words carried truth, and in the weeks that followed, Emily continued to grow stronger, though each day remained a gift they treasured carefully, for they knew that life was fragile, and the stormy night had reminded them that healing was never without trials, but they also knew that Buddy was there, steady as the earth beneath their feet, and they believed that no matter what challenges came, as long as Buddy stayed, Emily would never walk through them alone, and so part 4 of their story became a test of faith, a reminder that miracles are not without struggle, but it is in those darkest moments that faith shines the brightest, and for Michael, Laura, Emily, and all of Springfield, the bond between a dying girl and a mysterious golden dog had become more than hope. It had become a living testament to the power of love, courage, and belief in things beyond what the eyes can see. Winter gave way to spring in Springfield, and with the flowers blooming and the air turning warmer, Emily's health continued to surprise everyone, for the little girl who once had only days to live was now running across the yard with Buddy chasing happily beside her, her laughter ringing out like music that filled every heart with joy, and though doctors still shook their heads with disbelief, saying there was no medical explanation for her recovery, Michael and Laura knew the truth in their hearts, that something greater had touched their lives, something wrapped in golden fur and loyal eyes, and as months passed, Emily grew stronger, her days no longer filled with fear but with hope, her steps steadier, her voice brighter, her dreams no longer tied to hospital rooms but to the endless skies she watched with Buddy, and the town of Springfield, once so heavy with sorrow, now carried a spirit of celebration, for people said they had seen a miracle with their own eyes, and yet, as life often reminds us, every gift comes with change, and one morning Buddy was gone, as suddenly as he had arrived, and though Michael searched the streets, calling his name, and Laura asked every neighbor if they had seen him, no one knew where he had gone, and Emily, with tears streaming down her face, whispered that Buddy had done what he came to do, that he had saved her and now someone else needed him more, and though it broke her heart, she smiled through her tears with a wisdom far beyond her years, because she understood that love sometimes means letting go, and in the weeks that followed, Emily missed him deeply, looking out the window where he had first appeared, hoping to see his golden figure at the gate again, but Buddy never returned, and yet his presence never left her, for in her dreams he was always there, running beside her in fields of light, his gentle eyes reminding her that she was never alone, and as time went on, Emily's story became known far beyond Springfield, shared on television, in magazines, and later even in books, told as the tale of the little girl who had been given life again by a mysterious dog, and she herself grew into a young woman with a heart full of gratitude, using her voice to inspire others, speaking in schools, churches, and community gatherings, telling children and parents alike that miracles are real and sometimes arrive in the simplest of forms, not in grand miracles of thunder and light, but in the quiet presence of love that heals and protects, and people listened with tears in their eyes, moved by the story of Emily and Buddy, and though some called it chance and others called it faith, all agreed it was unforgettable, and as Emily grew older, she never forgot him, never stopped speaking of the friend who had changed her life, and she carried his memory with her like a warm light in her heart, and whenever life brought challenges, she closed her eyes and remembered the golden dog who had appeared when all hope was lost, and she found courage again, and years later when she was grown, walking through a park with her own children, one of them pointed at a golden dog in the distance, asking if it could be Buddy, and Emily smiled softly, her eyes misting as she replied, "Maybe it is, or maybe Buddy is wherever he is needed most," and her children, filled with wonder, believed every word, and though Emily knew deep down that she might never see him again, she also knew he had never truly left. For love does not vanish, it simply continues in ways we cannot always see, and so the legacy of Buddy lived on, not only in the heart of the girl he saved but in every person who heard her story and found hope in it, and in Springfield people still spoke of that time, remembering how the golden dog had come and changed everything, and when new families faced sorrow, they often reminded each other of Emily and Buddy, saying that miracles could still happen, and that no one was ever truly alone. And Emily, now strong and healthy, often stood on the porch of the little blue-curtained house, looking out at the street where Buddy had first appeared, whispering a thank you into the wind, believing that somewhere, somehow, he heard her, and that he was still running through the world, bringing hope to those who needed it most, just as he had once done for her, and in that quiet truth her heart found peace, knowing that his gift was not only her life but the reminder to everyone that love, in its purest form, is the greatest miracle of all.